Alright, this is John Colo at DiscountJuicers.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you, and what we're going to be doing this episode is share with you guys my top 10 tips on how to juice like a pro in any vertical slow juicer. I know some of you guys already own a vertical slow juicer, whether it's the Omega VSJ843, which is my favorite, or something like the Slowstar Juicer over on the other side, or basically any other brand. The tips I'll share with you guys in this episode are the tips you need to know so you're going to have the easiest and best juicing experience in a vertical slow juicer. Vertical slow juicers are unlike any other juicers on the market, and they're a little bit finicky. You got to treat them right, kind of like one of those maybe ex-girlfriends or ex-wives you might have had. Otherwise, they're not going to treat you right either, and they're going to produce excess pulp in the juice. They're not going to make a high of a yield. It may back up and clog on you. It also may be hard to disassemble because if you back it up so bad, the pulp gets stuck inside and you can't even take the juicer apart. And those are some signs that you're not using it properly. And in this video, I'm going to share with you guys my top 10 tips, because I juice pretty much every day. Besides selling juicers, I actually really juice, unlike probably many juice sellers out there. So I'm sharing with you guys my tips that I've never seen anywhere else. And some of these are quite unique, and some of them may not be condoned by the manufacturer. So use the tips that I'm sharing with you guys at your own risk. All right. So let's get into this episode, but before I do, I want to show you guys, if you guys are looking forward to buying a juicer and you're in the market for a juicer, I would encourage you guys to support me and my work by making your purchase at DiscountJuicers.com. This allows me to make these videos for you guys so I can continue to educate and share what I've learned about the juicers, as well as make all the different demonstration videos, because I really want to earn your business, and that's why I take hours out of my day to make this video, as well as many other hundreds of videos, over 500 videos on this YouTube channel dedicated to teaching you guys and share with you guys my experiences with juicers, so you can be an informed consumer. Because other big box stores, you can't call a big box store and say, hey, what's the best 10 tips to use a juicer? They're not going to know. They don't juice every day. I juice every day. This is an integral part of my life. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm still here today, because all the high quality fruits and vegetables that I get into me because of juicing. So your support buying your next juicer, if you don't already own one, or if you already own one and are looking to upgrade, hey, buy your next one at DiscountJuicers.com. It'll support me so I can continue to make these educational videos on YouTube for you guys. So I appreciate that, and thank you guys in advance for those of you guys that have supported me in the past, and thank you guys for those of you guys that will support me in the future. Any case, on with this video, I want to get right into it, okay? So, as much as the vertical slow juicers are my favorite style of juicer on the market, because they offer me two things. Number one, they offer the fastest speed, but more importantly than just being the fastest, it's offering me, number two, high quality juice. Of course, you could buy a centrifugal ejection juicer, and it's going to juice a lot faster. It's also going to aerate the juice. It's also going to make a lower quality juice. It's also not going to juice things like leafy greens super effectively, but it's faster. This one basically gives you the best of both worlds. So if you're looking for a juicer that's fast, but also gives you high nutrition and good quality juice, you will want to go with a vertical. Now, there are many vertical juicers out there. The original ones were made in Korea, as these two guys are right here today. But there's a lot of knockoffs now being imported from China with really short warranties, and I find that they just do not work as good and tend to clog more than some of the name brand juicers that are from Korea. I do encourage you guys to get a second generation vertical slow juicer, because just inherently by buying a second generation vertical slow juicer, it's just going to jam less and work a lot better than the first generation. And unfortunately, most of the knockoffs, or actually all the knockoffs I've seen from China, are all the knockoff of the first generation. They're not knocking off the second generation yet, which is to their peril. All right, so let me explain to you guys the second generation. So the second generation, as I take this apart, basically if you look at the bottom of the screen on the any vertical slow juicer, most of the screens have like a little small hole on the bottom of the screen, and this is a stoppage point for basically pulp coming out of the machine. And that's when the machine could back up more. So instead of having a small hole on the bottom of the screen, this actually just has one whole big hole on the bottom of the screen. So this lets more pulp through the machine without it clogging. In addition, another key factor on the second generation machines is on the bottom of the auger. You could actually stick your finger underneath there. It goes in, and this is basically like a pocket recess. Kind of helps with some of the back pressure so that it doesn't jack up your auger. So if you're really messing up and clogging up your second generation, you maybe not doing the best techniques, because it is harder, much harder to get these guys to back up on you. So the only second generation machines that I know of that are on the market at this time are the something like the Omega VSJ843, which we offer at Discount Juicers. Also the Slowstar Juicer, which are the two second generation machines that I recommend at this time, because they basically just work the best. I'm not even going to get into a comparison between these two specific juicers today. I have other videos on comparing these two machines, on which one's better, which one's worse. I'll put links down below if I remember. But yeah, that's step number one. Get the best vertical slow juicer. It's one of these two guys, or the Kuvings Whole Slow Juicer, which is a little bit different. But once again, I'll put a link down below, if I remember, to a video I did, top 3 vertical slow juicers for 2017. Each of these machines have their own sets of pros and cons. So these tips that I'm going to get into will work with any vertical slow juicer, whether you got a second generation, a first generation, or anything. Alright? So let's get started. Tip number 1 is obtain the best and highest quality, and more importantly, proper produce to juice. Super critical. You could fail right here, and I want to encourage you guys to do all 10 of these steps, not just 1 or 2 of them, for the best results. So what do I mean by selecting the proper produce? So by the proper produce, what I mean is fresh produce. I mean, I was just out in my backyard and I picked these Swiss chard leaves. These Swiss chard leaves are right out of my garden, nice and fresh. You know, they're not wilty, they're not old. They're going to juice a lot better than old stuff. I mean, and this can be a problem for some of you guys. You know, some of you guys go to the store and you buy organic food, and unfortunately maybe not a lot of people in your area buy organic food, so the organic food actually looks a lot worse condition, like it's wilty, it's going bad, it's been sitting in the store for a week, whereas the other Swiss chard sells more often and it looks kind of fresher, right? You got to get fresh produce, you know. Old, wilty, soft produce is not going to juice as well. This is especially the case with apples, right? Apples can be a big deal juicing in a vertical slow juicer, and having a soft, mealy apple could be the difference between getting an apple sauce out of a vertical slow juicer and actually getting apple juice. This is especially a problem at the end of apple season. You know, so the apple season is usually in the end of summer. That's when we get the fresh apples in the United States, and any apples that you buy, you know, starting in the springtime, are usually from last year's harvest, could be 6 months old, and when they've been in cold storage and an oxygen-deprived environment for 6 months to maintain their freshness, they get a little bit soft. And when you juice soft apples, it doesn't work as well. So you always want to check your apples. You know, if you can't find any good apples, I always recommend getting the Granny Smith apples. They generally have a much better texture than other style apples. Generally, I'm pretty cheap, so I just buy the cheapest organic apples that are on sale, and that's what I end up juicing. And sometimes, you know, that's fine, but sometimes, you know, I'll get a thicker juice with more pulp in it. And that's just because of the softer apples. And that goes with any fruit. I mean, especially when juicing something like pineapple, right? If you get a pineapple that you could press into and it's soft and it's giving like a ripe avocado, that pineapple is way too soft to be juicing. Maybe it's ripe enough and soft enough to be eaten, but not juicing. You want to pick your fruits, especially when they're hard and firm. This especially goes for other fruits, you know, like a cucumber. You're like thinking, John, cucumbers are vegetables. Well, technically they're fruits because they have seeds, as are zucchinis, right? So things with cucumbers, you want to get nice, hard, firm cucumbers. Don't get ones that are soft. They're not going to have as good of a texture, and they're not going to juice as well. Even something like watermelon, right? Sometimes you go to the store, you can press on the watermelon, and you can put your finger in it. That's kind of getting soft. It's kind of getting old. You know, the texture on the inside is not quite as crisp, and it's not going to juice as well. So you want to get nice, hard, firm produce. Same with the celery over here, right? With the celery, right, you want it nice. When you snap it, it should snap. I mean, actually, this one didn't snap so well. It's a little bit old, right? But you want to get one that's like more crisp and can snap, and that's going to actually work a lot better for you. So that's step number 1, obtain the highest quality produce. So some tips for you guys to do that are, number 1, grow your own food and only harvest it right before you're going to juice it. This way you're assured the freshest and highest quality food to juice. Also, this makes it incredibly inexpensive to juice, because literally if you have a field of greens in your backyard, you have unlimited juice inventory to be juicing, so you don't have to be paying for it or stock, whatever. Next tip is go to farmers markets and ask the farmers, when did you harvest this fruit or vegetable? Hopefully they said that morning. Maybe they said one day earlier. That way you know you're really getting fresh stuff, because if you just go to the grocery store, you don't know how long it's been sitting in their grocery store. You don't know how long it's been sitting in the warehouse before it even got to the grocery store, and you don't even know how long it's been before it was picked, put in cold storage, and then you've got shipped to the warehouse to get to you guys, right? So do the best you can with sourcing the highest quality and best produce, because this can make you or break you when juicing in a vertical slow juicer. Tip number 2 for juicing in a vertical slow juicer is this thing right here. This is your pusher. And if you formerly own something like a centrifugal ejection machine, you pretty much have to put the produce in the centrifugal ejection machine and push it down into the juicer with the pusher, or it's not going to get juiced. Same thing if you owned a Champion juicer. You got to use a pusher to push the food in the Champion, right? And even if you have a Norwalk, you got to use the pusher to push the food into the grinder of the Norwalk, right? Well, not so with the vertical slow juicers. You actually do not want to use a pusher. That could be pushing to your peril, right? Because if you're using a pusher, you're feeding it at your own pace, not the pace the juicer wants to accept the food. That's very important and very critical. How I like to use a juicer is I like to just basically take the produce, turn the juicer on, drop it in, and let the juicer auto-feed the produce into the machine. It feeds it at its own pace as it spins around. It's sucking it in and taking it in. It's not dependent on you pushing it in to shove it in faster than your juicer could accept it. It's like if you're feeding your wife a cake or your husband a cake, right? And just shove it all in their mouth like everybody does on their wedding day, right? Just shove it in their face, right? They can't bite it off and chew that fast. So it'd be nicer if you just gave them just a little bite and pulled it away, right? And so that's what we want to do with the juicers. We do not want to use the pusher because you will be overfeeding. So tip number 3 is you want to rotate the produce you're putting in the machine. Say you're juicing something like I got some carrots right here and some apples, right? It'd be a really bad idea to take all the carrots and put all the carrots through the machine. Okay, Joe and I juiced all the carrots. Now I'm going to juice all the apples. Then you put all the apples through the machine, right? Bad idea. Here's the reason why. Because every different produce item you're juicing has a little bit different texture. The apples have a much softer texture. You know, I could almost squeeze this in my hand and crush it, whereas I could never do that with a carrot. And when you do like the softer item last, it actually gets backed up in jams. So what you want to do is you want to rotate the produce you're putting in. So if I put a piece of apple, followed by a piece of carrot, followed by a piece of apple, followed by a carrot, guess what? The apple goes through the machine pretty well. Then the carrot behind it is really hard and fibrous. It helps push that soft apple through. And so you're going to get much better results. So whatever you're juicing, whatever the recipe, you're always going to want to put little bits of each item in and then keep rotating through. So for example, if I was juicing like Swiss chard, apples, and celery and carrots, I'd put probably the softest thing in first. I'd probably put a little bit of apple. Then I'd probably put in some chopped up Swiss chard. I'd put some chopped up celery, which are softer textures. Then the carrot, which is a nice hard firm texture that's really going to push everything through. And so in this way you're going to be more successful juicing in a vertical slow juicer. So tip number 4 is to pre-cut your produce properly. Depending on what you're juicing, you may have to cut your produce so that it fits in the machine, such as in the case of the watermelon. Right, if we just try to put the whole watermelon in there, it's not really going to fit in the machine. The feed chute's much smaller. So we need to cut up this watermelon so that it actually has can fit in the machine. So that's one point. As long as the produce could fit in the machine, you could definitely put it in, so like the carrots. But in the case of something like the celery or the leafy greens, we could take the celery and actually it'll easily go in the machine. But the problem is with celery and the leafy greens, they got the strings in there. And the vertical slow juicers do not effectively deal with strings that well. So with something like the celery, for example, you're going to want to take a knife and you're going to chop up the celery into like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch pieces. So you're just like making little pieces out of the celery. And so it's going to juice a lot better. Same thing with the Swiss chard, kale, collard greens, other things. I mean, this rib here on the Swiss chard is kind of like a celery, and if we break it, right, look at that, we got these strings. These little fibrous strings could jam up the juicer really bad. This is one of the biggest errors I see people make. So it's really important, to take your greens, and I'll just put them in one big bunch, and I'll just chop them up into little pieces like this. And I'm chopping up actually while the juicer's running. So say I'm juicing like apples and stuff, right? I could be dropping in an apple while I'm coming down and chopping up my Swiss chard and my celery. And then I'm dropping things in. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this actually. Let's go ahead and get a pulp collection bin here to catch all our pulp here. Let's go ahead and get a nice little glass pitcher to catch our juice here. Open this up. We're going to go ahead and turn this on. So I'm going to do something soft first. Once again, like I demonstrated, the cucumber is pretty soft. On the apples, you want to make sure you remove the stem. Don't juice the stem. We're going to cut this up into little pieces. Drop it in. Once again, we're not using that pusher. Now we're just going to take pieces of the celery and the Swiss chard and drop that in. Right? Once again, no pusher. All this just gets dropped in and it's kind of feeding as the juicer needs it. We're going to then take one of my favorite purple carrots, drop that in, right? Might have to use the carrot to push up. Now, if the feed chute gets clogged because things are not going into the machine, then and only then can you use something to push in. But we'll drop this carrot in and look at this carrot, right? It sucks it in a little bit at a time, chews off a little bit at a time, and sucks it in at its own pace. If you were using a pusher, that'd be happening way too quickly. But yeah, the point of this was to chop your produce. Now, I do not recommend chopping up things like carrots. Don't chop these up into little bits. Actually, that's not going to be good for juicing. You want to have the carrot in this biggest form as possible so that the juicer just like could chunk off little chunks at a time. Because if you chop things into little bits, the juicer can't chunk things off as much and it's not going to be as effective in pushing from what I've seen. And check it out, we already got some juice coming out. So yeah, chopping up your produce, super critical. Tip number 5 I talked about a little bit earlier was associated with not using the pusher but the feeding speed. As you guys can see, you know, I put some of the produce in there. We'll put another cucumber in there. But you can see the juice coming out, right? And even after I drop like maybe this carrot in there, you can see it slowly gets sucked into the machine. Just because if I look down the chute and I don't see a carrot in there, doesn't mean I should put the next produce item in. You want to slow down when feeding and take your time. I mean, if juice is running out, that means the juicer, even though you can't see it, is still juicing the carrot. So you want to give the juicer a little bit of time to run through juicing that carrot until you add the next thing. And in this case, maybe we'll add something soft like an apple, and then we're going to go ahead and add some of this delicious Swiss chard right in here. Once again, we're rotating the items we're putting through. Here we got a little beet. We're going to just go ahead and slice off a piece of beet and drop that in the machine. Beets are something else that's nice and firm and hard that's going to help push everything through the juicer. So tip number 6, when juicing in a vertical slow juicer, one of the things you're going to want to do is add enough root vegetables or other hard, firm vegetables that are literally going to act like the broom that's going to push through all the soft, you know, apple and cucumber and leafy greens through the machine. So one of my favorite root vegetables to use are something like carrots, whether I got standard orange carrots, which are really inexpensive and popular, or the more higher antioxidant purple carrots that I really like a lot. You could also find white carrots and yellow carrots and even red carrots, right? So that's something else I've used, the carrots. But if you don't want to juice carrots for some reason, you could use something like sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes will also work in place of carrots to help kind of give the juicer something to grab onto and push all that softer pulp out from things like fruits and leafy greens. Another thing you guys can use is this guy right here. Know what this is? This is a root vegetable known as jicama. Jicama grows in the tropics. This jicama is actually grown in Mexico. The jicama has a nice, really neutral flavor, nice mild flavor, will add a lot of water, good water content to your juice. Also some beneficial prebiotics to your juice, but also it's going to act and help push some of that softer stuff through. Now don't be alarmed when you do juice jicama, your juicer will start making some squeaking noises, but that's totally normal. The other benefit of jicama is that it can be quite inexpensive depending on where you live in the country. You know, I got this jicama for 3 pounds, sometimes 4 pounds for $1. So it's actually quite inexpensive. So that can help you guys out a lot also. If you don't want to juice jicama or the carrots, you know, the beets will be a nice, another root vegetable that you can actually put through there that's going to clean out the juicer from the soft pulp from the fruits and the leafy greens. Other things you might want to use are turnips, rutabagas, daikon radish in smaller amounts because those guys can get kind of hot and spicy. But another thing you might want to use is something like celery root, which is another really nice one to use. You could use also parsnips, another really good one. And of course, the final one I'll recommend is something like kohlrabi that you will want to peel before juicing. Same thing on the jicama, you will want to peel this guy before juicing as well. But those guys, all those root vegetables, will help push through some of the softer fruits and leaves through the machine. I know some of you guys might want to juice, John, I just want to juice fruits and leaves. So like I want to have a green juice with some fruits to make it sweet. Well, then I would encourage you guys to add enough roots so that the vertical juicers will work properly. You know, I mean, if you just are hard set on juicing leaves and only fruits without any harder vegetables, then you might want to go for a horizontal single auger juicer. That style machine generally doesn't get clogged up as bad, you know, if you're juicing only leaves with some small amounts of fruit. That being said, add something like jicama. It's going to add nice water content, not a lot of sugar for you guys, and it's going to really dilute your juice well, so it's going to work better in any vertical juicer. So tip number 7 is what I call the pull-out technique when juicing. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this. Basically, what happens sometimes is that sometimes you'll just take a whole carrot and you'll dunk it in there and just let it go like I've done in the past, and the whole carrot just literally gets chunked off bit by bit. In some juicers, such as the VSJ843, that may be problematic. In the Slowstar, that's never a problem. But the VSJ sometimes has challenges with the motor torque if your carrot is too thick, too fat. So then you just want to basically dunk it in, let the juicer take a couple bites, and then pull it out, right? Let the juicer work on the bites. You can hear it literally working on it. And then you'll hear it maybe not as noisy. You let it dunk in a little bit. Let it take 2 bites. You can hear it literally chew up the carrots. And as it makes that juice out of it, it runs through that. Dunk it in again. Let it take 2 bites and pull it out, right? This is the pull-out technique. Can be valuable with something like carrots. Once the carrot gets really small, then you can just actually dunk it in. Another thing you guys can use the pull-out technique is with celery. That being said, I do not recommend using the pull-out technique with the celery. It's best to chop the celery as I demonstrated earlier. But if you use a pull-out technique with celery, you want to put it in and pull it out and let the machine take off only a little chunk of it. Once again, we'll let it put in and take another chunk out. Put it in, let it take a chunk out. And maybe only put it in like, I don't know, like no more than a 1/4 inch, and let it take a 1/4 inch off at a time. This way, it's kind of the machine will do partly some of the breakup of the little strings, although it's not going to be as effective as if you were cutting it with a knife, because you guys can see still the strings are intact there, but this is working much better than just letting the celery fall in haphazardly. So the next tip I want to give you guys is I'm going to have to change the camera angle, because this is what's called the side feed chute technique, right? I maybe talked about this before in one of my videos, but I haven't really had a video on it before, and I want to go ahead and show you guys why this can be so beneficial, but most importantly, only if you're using something like a VSJ843 or a Slowstar, because it has what's called a dual blade auger that actually has 2 little blades that are not super sharp like a knife, but they do help to cut the produce up. This technique will not work on many other vertical slow juicers that actually don't have the blade system. They just basically grind up the produce. This technique will not work. So let me go ahead and show you guys what I mean. Alright, so there you can see the feed chute of the juicer and the auger going around. And as you guys can see, the auger is going around in a clockwise direction. So what you want to do is you want to take a produce item, and you're not going to put it on this side of the feed chute, right? You're going to put it on this side of the feed chute, and as the auger comes around, then it's going to be more effective at cutting off a little piece like I was showing in the pull-off technique. If you just put the you know, the piece of produce haphazardly in there, you know, it doesn't really get cut as well. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that with celery. So, for example, with the celery, instead of putting it on this side and feeding it in, right, you see how it gets dragged over to the other side, right? That's not getting effectively chopped. So if you put the celery over on this side of the feed chute and put it down and then pull it up, it's going to get more effectively cut up, and pieces are going to come off it more effectively. So this is the feed chute technique that you might want to actually feed every time into the machine. Make sure you put it onto this side of the feed chute instead of haphazardly in the center if you are putting it in and pulling it out and guiding it in like I said earlier. So like, yeah, I would never usually drop that in like that at the end, because, you know, you're just asking for trouble with all those celery strings. Normally I would actually, and it's better to pre-cut the celery, but you could use this side feed chute technique with carrots and other long things to work a little bit more efficiently. So we're getting down to the final 2 tips, and tip number 9, this is probably a non-sanctioned tip, so do this one at your own risk. because if you don't do this right, you could potentially damage your machine. I've done this many times without any incidents, but I'm paying attention. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and get a butter knife, and I always like to stop the juicer when I'm doing this. Don't have the juicer running while you're doing this by any means. But I use a butter knife with a soft tip. You know, it's not sharp or anything like that. And you know, as you're juicing, the pulp port where the pulp comes out generally will get clogged, right? Sometimes the pulp port is, say the whole width is 100%, and by the time you're juicing, sometimes like in this machine right now, about only 1/3 of the pulp is coming out. And this means that if it's not coming out the full size of the chute, it's getting backed up in there. And this usually happens if you're not pre-cutting some of the produce like the celery. So what I like to do is actually just take a butter knife when the machine's off, and I just like to go in with the butter knife, and we'll show you guys this. We'll go in on the top of the feed chute and kind of go all the way back until I feel resistance, and then I'll like tip it down, and then I'll pull this out to kind of dislodge some of that pulp in there. And hopefully when I do this, it'll break up some of the different fibers in there, right? And if I see like pulp that's stuck, look, I just dug that out, and I dug out all these little celery strings, and this was likely causing a clog, and that's why the pulp was not flowing out 100% of the feed chute, pulp chute width, right? Now this is not super critical, right? But this is just one of those extra added tips that might help you push you over the edge so you're more successful. You don't necessarily need to do this tip if you're cutting and pre-cutting and alternate feeding everything. This is just kind of like an extra tip that I've learned over time. And you know, no holds barred with me. I share everything that I know with you guys so you guys can have the best and easiest time juicing. Let's go ahead and juice some other cucumber. Let's go ahead and cut up a lemon. So on this lemon here, I like to basically just cut the whole lemon in half and put the skin in and all. That's going to work a lot better. We still got some of these pre-cut greens we're going to go ahead and put in there. And so after I did the technique with the butter knife, looks like about, we got at least minimum half of the pulp coming out of the machine now. Once again, here's that zucchini going right in, getting sucked right in. So yeah, it's working definitely a lot better, less back pressure with that butter knife technique. So tip number 10 for juicing successfully in any vertical juicer is probably the most important that I saved for last, right? It's all about having to do with your juice recipe and optimizing your juice recipe to work in a vertical slow juicer. Unfortunately, 99.9% of juice recipes I've seen out there are not designed specifically to juice in a vertical slow juicer. You know, they are made when they had the centrifugal ejection juicers, or people just came up with this recipe and that's what they juice, right? But just because a recipe's out there doesn't mean you're going to be successful at juicing it in a vertical slow juicer. You know, especially a juice with maybe like celery, romaine, kale, parsley, and apples and lemons. You know, that one may not work so well in a vertical slow juicer. Why? Well, if you're paying attention earlier, one of my earlier tips, I think my tip number 6 was add enough root vegetables. That recipe doesn't have any root vegetables. Not to say that you can't do that in a vertical slow juicer, because with enough chopped up celery, you can actually use chopped up celery in place of the root vegetables. But you're going to have to at least double or triple the amount of celery, you know, in the recipe to compensate, and of course rotating the produce as you're putting in. That being said, the easiest way is to just add some root vegetables to your recipes, guys. You know, so if you want to juice apples that tend to be soft and a little bit mealier, right? Not a problem. You could do that. Just make sure you alternate feed with carrots so that that'll push the soft stuff through, right? I mean, the main thing is you want to make sure you have enough root vegetables in there. And add the jicama, man. The jicama is a really inexpensive root vegetable that's not too expensive. That's really going to help push all that soft pulp through. Because, I mean, that's really the premise of the vertical slow juicer. It's kind of like the analogy, right? I mean, you could have a pair of shoes. If you're a lady, you could have a pair of pumps, right? High heels. And they look great when you go to a wedding or some kind of formal occasion, but they're horrible to run in. And like I've seen in some movies, when they got to run in their, their high heel shoes, they might break off the high heel, so they run in them, or they'll just take them off completely, right? So they're kind of making it work. And so with the recipes, you could kind of adjust them and make them work with a vertical slow juicer just by adding some root vegetables. You know, I like to add carrots. I like to add the purple carrots, which add high antioxidants to the juice I'm making, add the jicama, add some other kind of root vegetables. Or if you don't want to add the root vegetables, add a lot more celery and make sure it's chopped up first, right? Something like pineapples, right? You could definitely juice pineapples, and pineapples juice the best in the Omega VSJ from what I've tested of all the juicers I've tested. But it's very important to cut the pineapple properly and feed it properly. So I do have a special video on juicing pineapples in the Vertical juicer. I'll put a link down below if I remember to that, so you guys could watch that. But they juice easily if you do it properly, right? The core is the hardest part to juice on the pineapple, so that's why I juice that last, and actually I'll dice it up in little pieces, both lengthwise and crosswise. Something like watermelons. Watermelons will juice beautifully in the Vertical Slow Juicers. I like to juice them with the rind. The rind helps to push the softer middle pulp through. Also, I juice them with the seeds. You'll get some nutrient extraction from the seeds as well, and the seeds will help to push some of the pulp through. And depending on what Vertical Slow Juicer you're using, sometimes the seeds will get crushed up so well that it actually might block up the juicer. So pay attention. But yeah, so adjusting your recipe appropriately and not wanting to make everything, but know that, hey, if you get a Vertical Slow Juicer or if you already have one, hey, by modifying the recipe, by adding a few extra carrots and by rotating a few extra carrots and maybe a few parsnips or, you know, some jicama, the recipe could work a lot better. So I want you guys to be open to changing your approach so that you guys can get the best results out of your Vertical Slow Juicer. So that's pretty much all my tips for today. If you guys appreciated my tips, enjoyed them, and learned from them, hey, please be sure to give me a thumbs up on this video. That'll encourage me to make more videos like this, sharing my tips in the future. This is the juicer that I use every day in my kitchen when I'm home, when I'm not traveling. The Omega VSJ, sometimes I'll juice 2-3 times a day even. And so I've come up with a lot of these tips over the years, as well as, you know, tips from customers that have written in. So I want to thank you guys if you're one of my customers that have actually written in with, hey John, try this tip. And I'm like, I tried. I was like, wow, that really worked, you know. Another tip you guys might use as a extra bonus is, you know, sometimes close the spout cap and pour just some filtered water in the middle of juicing. That might help to dislodge some of the stuff and then continue juicing, and your juice is going to be watered down with a little bit of extra water. But that's another tip that might help you guys out there. I only share with you guys these tips because, you know, these tips have been helped me to juice, and I want you guys to be the most efficient and most effective juicers out there. And, you know, and especially if you buy from discountjuicers.com, or even if you don't, right, I want you guys to be juicers for life, because juicing is probably one of the biggest things that can make the biggest difference in your life today with all these processed foods and people eating animal foods in excess, right? The fruits and vegetables are undoubtedly the best foods on the planet, but unfortunately most people don't eat enough of them because they don't like the taste. They don't like crunching on celery, but hey, drinking some celery juice, right? Super simple. You're going to get the majority of the nutrition out of the celery without having to crunch up on them, right? You could get broccoli and cauliflower and even Brussels sprouts in you by just simply drinking the juice and dilute it with some apples or something like pineapple, which is one of my favorite things to do lately. So yeah, I want to thank you guys in advance for watching this episode all the way through. Also be sure to click that subscribe button right down below to be notified of my new upcoming episodes. I'm coming out about every 5 to 7 days on this YouTube channel. You never know what kind of tips you'll be learning or what kind of juicer or even vacuum blender demonstration I'll be sharing with you guys. Also be sure to check my past episodes. My past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 500 videos on this YouTube channel dedicated to teach you guys all aspects about how to juice and comparing juicers so you guys can get the right juicer for you. And finally, you know, I encourage you guys to support me in my work by making your purchase at discountjuicers.com. Your purchase directly allows me to continue to make these videos so that I can continue to educate you guys about the finer points of juicing that other stores and places are simply just not doing. They just want your money, right? I want you guys to get a juice that you're actually going to use every day, and more importantly, know how to use it so that you'll be more happy with it in the end, instead of just having to return the juicer because you didn't like it, because maybe they didn't make a video like this to show you guys all the finer points on how to get the most and best use out of your juicer. So with that, my name is John Kohler with discountjuicers.com. Be sure to visit discountjuicers.com/YouTube for special promotional offers for YouTube visitors.